Are genetics a byproduct of reality, or is your reality a byproduct of your genetics? The whole argument comes back to the notion of nature versus nurture, in that which has more influence over the other. Well, let's first dive a little bit into what genetics actually is. I mean, genetics is like a history book, but in the sense that it's your molecular history. It's the history of you and your ancestral database all the way back to the beginning of complex molecular chains themselves. So, which came first? This genetic history or a reality beyond genetics? And which influenced the other? Well, current scientific hypotheses and theories, backed up by evidence, shows that complex chains arose due to conditions of the environment. So in that sense, environment itself was the precursor to genetics, in that genetics are a byproduct of what the environment is. So in a sense, genetics are at the mercy of the conditions that they're presented within. But is that really true? I mean, what is your environment in the first place? And what has more play today? The environment on you or genetics on the environment? That being the case in which genetics are your molecular history, is it not true to say that your environment in which you are born within is due to your genetic makeup? So what's the initial cause here? Is the environment more at play, or is your genetic makeup more at play? I mean, if you think about it, you are where you are due to the sequence of events which has led up to your life. That sequence of events is recorded in your genetic makeup. So in that sense, the environment in which you find yourself and the reality that is at play is in essence directly linked and correlated to your genetic makeup. I mean, the sociogenetic relationship is one which has been highly documented. And socioeconomics and the demographics of a society themselves certainly has a large part to play on the genetics that are inherited from generation to generation. So when you look at population genetics as a whole, there are things that are known as subpopulations. Subpopulations, they're still a part of the same species. However, there's a sense of differentiation or significant difference in the genetic makeup of the population due to things such as demographics and socioeconomic class. So, really, is your reality merely a byproduct of your genetic makeup, just as the reality of a nation's history? A nation's history is what makes up its reality today. It's merely the built-up sequential events which has led up to this point in time. And significant events cause changes in reality and perception as we see reality. And due to actions of humanity, the environment is actually altered. And what is it that influences the actions of humanity more so than their genetic makeup? So it's this very complex dual relationship where, due to the fact that you're born into a certain environment, but the environment that you're born into is due to your genetics, because your genetics is the molecular history of your ancestry, and your ancestry has a lot to do with your environment, due to the fact that certain people find themselves as specialists, and as they become specialists within society, you're more likely to find yourself within a certain environment. And so, in a sense, the environment that you're born into is inherited. So, that being stated, your reality is inherited and due to a genetic historical makeup. Kind of interesting to think about. And, you know, when you think about it for a minute, you think, okay, so maybe initially genetics were a byproduct of the environment, and evolution tells us that genetics are a byproduct of environment because genetic makeup is due to factors which influence, you know, the success of an individual within a population. The more successful the individual, the more they're able to influence later generations. And, you know, things such as like allele frequencies between populations, which will pass on this inherited trait. And so, as this inherited trait is passed on, then it's a mere factor that it's due to the environment. Well, if we think about the simple fact that people today actually create the reality in which they live within, what's more at play here then? The environment on genetics or genetics on the environment? Because if you think about it, humanity has a very specific ability to control the environment which it finds itself within. And so we're almost at some sort of like paradigm shift here, where the reality which we live within is no longer, you know, so much due to conditions beyond our control. And in a sense, they're things which we have control over. And so where will this lead the genetic conundrum? In the sense that what's more prevalent, environment influencing genetics or genetics influencing environment? You know, we already went over the fact that genetics is merely your ancestral makeup or history boxed into one tiny package, which, you know, shows your traits as a human being or any other sort of multicellular or single-celled organism, which we define as a living thing. But the fact of the matter is that now genetics seems to have a role over environmental makeup and no longer is at the mercy of the environment and conditional parameters influencing its makeup itself. So where will the human population go from here? Genetics are still influenced by the environment in the sense that as people actually alter the environment due to humanity's will to progress in certain ways, certain genes will actually be more beneficial in the environment created. So it's kind of like I said before, this odd relationship of a yin and yang, where humans create the environment that they live within, but then the environment itself is selectively choosing genes which are successful within the given environment that was once created by humans themselves. And so you see how it's almost like this loop where people are creating the environment, but then the environment itself is selecting genes that will be inherited and passed on, which will alter the future generations of human beings as we know it. So in a sense, people have the ability, you know, utilizing the sciences such as chemistry, biology, and physics, and engineering to influence the environment in ways which will directly have an influence on genetic makeup. But then you go back to the question, you know, and the inherent initial question itself. what's the initial causal effect here? Genetics or the environment? But like I said before, it's almost like this loop where people are creating the environment that they live within, and then the environment is selecting the genes which are more able to effectively live within this environment. It's this really odd relationship that presents itself, and it's one that I think should be looked into a little more readily than it actually is, due to the fact that this is kind of, the projects of eugenics have been around for a long time, but eugenics has been primarily due to selective breeding for traits. And these traits aren't necessarily always, selected for the utmost of performance within an environment. They're not necessarily to capitalize on, environmental conditions themselves. Eugenics is like the selective breeding of dogs or cats. It gives you the breed and varieties that you want and desire, and due to sexual selection, we have different varieties of, breeds within a subset of species itself. But this whole looped system of where humanity has the ability to change its environment, which will then be selecting its own, genetic makeup in the future, isn't necessarily eugenics. In a way it kind of is, because if you postulate the ways in which genetic frequencies will actually give inherited traits among individuals, which will succeed in different environments better than other gene traits, then if you knew all that, you could use the practice of eugenics to selectively alter humanity's future by saying the gene frequency and allele frequency is going to go this way in the population, and create, speciation through this manner, because people with these traits are going to be able to be more successful in this way. So you could almost use it in a manner consistent with eugenics, but instead of the mere, just sexual selection based upon physical and visible traits at the time, you're looking at traits which would be more beneficial within the environment you want to create. So you have this idea of the environment you wish to create, and so you move humanity's future towards that environment. You say, all right, I see that we have the power to control the environment which humanity will find itself in the next few millennia. And as you postulate and hypothesize about the environment itself, and you having the ability to create this environment, it goes hand in hand that you will not only be influencing the environment, but the successful genetic makeup of the future populations which inherit this environment, because as the environment changes and becomes altered, it's going to influence the genetic makeup and possibly cause speciation, and subdivisions of populations and subdivisions within species themselves. So humanity is on this verge of really controlling its future, and in a lot of ways advancement isn't necessarily good advancement, in that we really need to look at what we wish to advance towards for it to be considered progress, because I can progress towards many things, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's beneficial towards the human experience itself. What is the most beneficial human experience that one could possibly have? Today we live in a society which is very readily concerned with productivity and production of goods. I mean, is this necessarily the most beneficial environment towards the human experience? It's kind of ironic. You can say, we're more advanced than previous civilizations, but are we really more advanced in the sense that this progress has led towards the greater experience for the human experience itself? Or has this whole paradigm shift or zeitgeist of the human consciousness at this time, which people believe to be the purpose and the requirements of life, has actually diminished the human experience itself? Sure, technologically you could say we're more advanced, but has this advancement actually diminished the human experience, or has it been able to increase the human experience towards the point of flourishing beyond that which we once thought possible? And so, all things considered, we live really in amazing times today, and it's not necessarily better than times previous if we consider, the factorization of human experience itself into the equation, rather than things such as knowledge and IQ and the ability to understand our surroundings as a whole and manipulate our surroundings to conform with that which we want, rather than the experience of life and mere means of production and productivity of goods to satisfy very fleeting desires rather than fulfilling moments, which could be utilized to help enhance the human experience itself and get in touch with more about what it really means to be alive and actually be social individuals, where we can function as a group and have a sense of identity as an individual unit and person. So lots of things to ponder about and hypothesize and postulate as to their implications on society and mankind. I hear a lot about this transhumanism movement, where the merging of man and machine, where the way in which humanity will actually evolve is through combining our biological components with technological components. And in my own personal opinion, I think that to really be, something which is in a way really actually kind of disgusting. In my personal opinion, I think that, the human body in its completeness, physically fit, is a lot more aesthetically pleasing than some sort of transhumanism movement. And people say, well, we're going to be overtaken by machines. I don't necessarily think that that's true. If you look at the landscape and the environment as sort of a living being on its own. So you have the landscape, you have the environment making up an ecosystem. An ecosystem itself is like one giant computer, computing processes and transmission of information in a very efficient manner with very little loss on data and other things which are relatable to, the computer and the technological world. So if you look at it in that sense, the grand immense nature of nature itself outweighs, the possibilities that technological advancements within computers and other advancements would, in actuality, be dwindled by the immense vastness and complexity and knowledge that is the natural world, which is the biological world. So I just think it's a little bit more of kind of tapping into this environment and really geoforming our environment to one which can enhance the human experience. And if you think that humans today are the smartest that they've ever been, then I think that you might be in for a little bit of a rude awakening. Because it all comes down to how you view intelligence. What is smart? And smart is very relative. A lot of people scoff at Neanderthal and ancestral man, but the matter of the fact is this: how many of you could go out and start a fire and live on your own and, build structures to live within and hunt animals and dress them out and harvest nourishment, know exactly which plants to eat? In that sense, ancestral man is more intelligent and smarter than a lot of individuals today. A lot of individuals today rely on the social organism that is humanity itself rather than the individual themselves. So, what is smart and what is intelligent? It really is based upon the environment that we live within. And this goes back to the whole genetic makeup discussion I was having earlier, because what is deemed as smart is deemed by society not necessarily a true gauge of intelligence. Because intellect itself is seen as somebody who is able to flourish within a set parameter of conditions present. However, as conditions change, what general idea the people have to be as intellect changes as well. So, in a sense, intelligence is relative to circumstance, but circumstance is in direct correlation to genetic makeup. And the environment itself can be altered through genetic makeup because we're genetic beings of molecular complexities, which give us our waking reality, in which we're born into an environment which is in a direct relation to our genetic code, yet we have the ability to influence the environment given our genetic code, influencing our genetic code itself. So there you go. It's a whole loophole system in which we have the ability to control not only now, but the future as well, given the past. So again, where does humanity want to go? And what truly is intelligence? One of the most fascinating discoveries which I've came across in recent, personal history is the discovery of Boskop man. And Boskop man is this, he's classified as Homo in the genus. So, you have kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. And so Boskop man is Homo in the sense that he's in the genus that we're within. And this genus actually shows potential for greater intellect, utilizing a different measurement system, of course, rather than environment selecting what is intelligence or not, than most humans today. Because the ratio of the skull size or the cranial cavity itself is a lot larger ratio than modern man today. Again, it's called Boskop man, if you look it up, if you want to check it out. So, how a lot of anthropologists and archaeologists classify certain mammalia and other organisms as intelligent species is their cranial cavity size in direct proportion to their body size. How much of their body mass their body mass is actually related to the biomass of their computing selves, of their brains, of their neurology. How much of their biomass is dedicated towards maintaining this processing unit of critical thinking and of observation. And Boskop man actually shows a very significant higher ratio of brain cavity size in relation to modern man today. And it's quite fascinating, actually. Modern man today is really reliant upon humanity itself. So many things are specialized. Our waking daily lives are specialized. And it's almost as if without these specialists, in no way could we accomplish our daily tasks in themselves. For example, I have concepts and ideas about how a lot of this technology that I'm working with actually works. Through my computer and through my device, such as my cell phone, which is capturing this image and then transforming this image into something else which other people can view and partake within and observe themselves. So I have some concept about how it works due to my education and whatnot. But the fact of the matter is that I'm reliant upon specialists who specialize in certain fields of knowledge. And in that sense, I'm reliant upon the rest of humanity itself to accomplish what it is that I do every single moment of my waking life. It seems that ancestral man in a lot of ways was a lot more independent rather than what we deem to be civilized. Our whole society is based upon agriculture. Agriculture is the foundation for innovation. And what this foundation allows humanity and civilization to actually do, it allows humanity and civilization to specialize, just like I was talking about. Because as soon as the requirements of nourishment are met through agriculture, then it allows people to explore avenues that, aren't necessarily deemed as a necessity or a requirement of life. We're able to explore new avenues because our necessities and requirements are met due to the fact that we're based upon a foundation of agriculture, which allows there to be specialists, which allows us to gain a lot more knowledge as a whole group rather than as an individual unit. In a lot of ways, it's an advancement, but in a lot of ways, it detracts from the human experience itself. We call social media social, but is it really that? In a lot of ways, it's a lot less social than socializing with a group of people in an environment that allows you to physically communicate with them, face to face. Sure, we have FaceTime, but I'm still looking at a two-dimensional screen where I can't physically touch another being. And so we're all compartmentalized within our cubicles, even if we don't work within a cubicle. So again, are we truly advanced in the sense that the human experience itself has progressed from what it once was? Or have we merely advanced technology and diminished the human experience? Time will tell if the advancement of technology is able to progress the sense of what it is to be alive and experience life, or whether or not it will simply diminish our ability to effectively communicate with each other and gain a sense of what it really means to be alive and to be human at the same time. You know, where the boundary between what it actually means to be human is also being brought into question when we talk about genetic engineering and possibly transhumanism. In my personal opinion, I'm much more, in favoritism of genetic engineering before I'd ever hop aboard the wagon of transhumanism, where we merge self with technological components. I think the use of technological components to alter genetic makeup would actually be a lot more neat and, be able to advance the human experience and the species as a whole itself, rather than merely merging ourselves with, artificial components. Why not actually look at the material world in a much more biological manner and learn to manipulate this biology rather than learning to manipulate technology? Use technology to manipulate the biology and enhance what it means to be human that way. The funny thing about genetic engineering is that what you genetically engineer isn't necessarily something which could be successful within the environment given. I could genetically engineer like a Tyrannosaurus Rex, but the fact of the matter is that it might not be very healthy in the environment that we live in today. When T-Rex was around, obviously the environment and the atmosphere and the conditions present on planet Earth were significantly different than they are today. The whole flora and fauna of the world itself has significantly changed since those times. So what genetic engineering actually allows us to do is to manipulate the code of life itself and actually put things in a region of space where they're almost out of place. Because like I said before, is genetics merely a product of the environment, or is the environment a product of genetics? Well, as soon as you bring into the fact that utilizing our genetic makeup ourselves as people, we have the ability to influence the environment, then it takes a whole pole shift. And kind of once what was north and what was south is now flipped and reversed. And in a sense, genetics actually has the upper hand on the environment because, due to our genetic makeup, which gives us our ability to think and manipulate, allows us to alter the environment, which will alter ourselves. I was thinking the other day, how would humanity evolve if we progress more towards technological advancement rather than the advancement of the human body for purposes of aesthetics or for purposes of performance? What if we merely forget aesthetics and performance and we merely seek to progress technologically? How would the human being itself actually differ in upcoming years than it does today? So I think it's kind of very similar to what people picture as, what extraterrestrial aliens actually look like. They're like these very spindly, long-armed, long-legged, big-headed creatures with big old eyes that don't really have much muscular definition, but they have a lot of powers and observation and obviously intellect, which, like I previously stated, the more intellect you have, the more ability you have to control and manipulate the environment. But as you manipulate the environment more towards technological advancement, what you get is somebody who doesn't necessarily have to rely on their own muscular makeup anymore. They merely rely on their ability to manipulate the environment, which comes from their intellect and their critical thinking and observatory portions of their biomass, which is within their brain. So the brain would become enlarged, muscular features would diminish, and due to the fact that, who knows, we might be traveling through outer space, gravity itself would also play an important role on the evolution of man. And so as the environment is changed, mankind itself evolves to, fit within a successful form, which is able to live within the environment present. So if the environment present is one which I just described, where mankind is totally at the mercy of technology to accomplish tasks and goals, then mankind itself in the future might look a lot more alien than you would possibly imagine, because we're reliant upon technology to accomplish our day-to-day tasks. And so anyways, the results would just be, what people depict to be extraterrestrial aliens today, right now, through their imagination expressed, through art forms, would possibly be a reality of mankind's future if we progress in that manner, rather than progressing in an alternate direction. Like, for example, let's say that if mankind was to say, all right, technology itself is very diminishing on the human experience. We really need to get back to our roots and back to what it actually means to be human and as a living entity. The statement, ignorance is bliss, is kind of hard to contemplate, because whoever came up with the statement themselves wasn't ignorant in the first place. So how would they know if ignorance was bliss? Because they're not. So the statement kind of contradicts itself. But what if mankind was to say, we need to get back to our roots, we need to stop being so technologically and intellectually involved, and we need to rediscover what it means to be human and what it means to be alive and a part of this world. And so we look at civilizations and societies which actually were more in tune with the earth and with themselves and with others as a social organism, and with a lot less means of technologically communicating ideas. The human body and the human form was the technology to communicate ideas, and it was this knowledge warehouse, instead of technology being that warehouse for the mind, rather than the mind being the warehouse for technology. So you look at past civilizations, let's look at civilizations which achieved grand things, such as the Maya, the Inca, Egyptians, and Greeks and Romans. Those are just a few that come to mind when I think about civilizations which were a lot more in tune with the earth and with each other as a social organism, where they didn't have this intermediary step of requirement to utilize technology as a means to be a constructive organism. They utilized their own physical form to accomplish that task. And so, does humanity want to go back, and is actually regression in a sense progression? Well, again, it all matters on what we're progressing towards. And to really think about what it is that you want. And the fact of the matter is, it's not always just about what you want, because the world in itself is a lot of competing wills rather than just one ultimate divine will. It's the wills of a lot of different individuals against the wills of a lot of different individuals. And it's not necessarily two-sided either. It's this multi-conglomerate thing which has, you know, everybody wanting to go in separate directions, but nobody wanting to go in one direction, which is why you see advancement come along when people are able to have an affluent leader that's able to lead the people towards one common goal and is able to effectively communicate ideas of thought. And as these ideas of thought are, you know, resonating with the people as one body, they're much more able to accomplish goals and tasks towards progression or advancements, rather than everybody kind of fighting for what it is that they want themselves. If you're able to convince everybody to work towards that which you want, then in a sense you're influencing everybody to act as one unit. So what if instead of everybody looking as, you know, the world population is a lot more individualistic, kind of looked at things as a lot more community-based oriented and social. There are a lot of people that participate in group activities on a weekly or daily basis. You know, people go and worship religious sects, and it allows them to be a part of a community and you know, work towards one common goal. And in a sense, a lot of those people, again, you still find a very broad array of what progression actually means and what they actually want to progress towards. It's very hard to control one body and be a leader of free-thinking people. This whole method of subversive tactics comes into play where, you know, you're constantly trying to gauge the psychology of one mass unit so that you can effectively communicate ideas and psychologically influence their behavior. But by treating them as one mass unit, you're not able to ever connect with the individual, because nobody, in a sense, is, you know, the majority themselves, as is said by statistics, but the majority is made up by statistics, and it's not necessarily any one individual. So how is it that you can play on the psychology of everybody to act as one body and, you know, work them all towards one goal? And that seems like a little bit of a tyrannical way to look at it, because you're using methods of subversion to influence behavior rather than open discussion to try and influence the progression of a people. But a lot of people still do that today, and a lot of people have been doing that for as long as, you know, recorded history has been recorded. Man, life is composed of a lot of different components, and I really think that you're able to tune into the universe if you want to. But how you actually accomplish that is in a lot of ways a much more practical method than what, you know, a lot of people either esoterically or mystically approach it as. You know, they say, oh, you must become in tune with the universe. Well, in my personal opinion, the best way to become in tune with the universe is to study it. And what, in a sense, is the study of the universe? The study of the universe is the area and knowledge known as science. So if you really want to become in tune with the universe, it's a lot less esoterical and mystical than you might actually think, or a lot of people come across as actually being. No, the true way to really connect and become in tune with the universe is to study it. And what is the study of the universe? It is the foundation, as we know, as science. So if you want to really know the universe, go pick up a biology book, a biology on mathematics, a book on engineering, a book on physics, all of these different areas and facets of knowledge itself, because these are the principles which the universe operates on and upon. And so by studying these components and these facets of knowledge, you in a sense, in a way, are actually becoming in tune with your surroundings, which your surroundings are the universe. So that's how you really actually become in tune with the universe. Because tuning in is merely the focusing out of everything else and the focusing in on that which you're searching for. So if you're searching for knowledge, then you better focus in on the certain aspects of knowledge which you wish to glean knowledge about. And the best way to do that is to open up a book or to, watch videos on certain topics. You can tune in to a certain channel and open yourself up to the information and become a medium for that which is being transmitted through the universe to you. See, I can make it sound mystical and esoteric, but in practical means, it actually really isn't. But in a lot of ways in today's society, you've got to be able to flip-flop between the two and gauge meaning in a way that allows both to really exist and be true, because the words themselves are merely used due to certain aspects of time, where words were used during that time to describe certain things, and outside of that time they're taken in a different light when they should be taken this way in comparison to how things are being said in today's society. So that's what you always have to gauge when you're listening to somebody else speak, even within the same language of individuals, of a population, of a society. I still have to translate what it is that they're saying, because there's slang, there's different nuances between language within a certain population. And so even today within one society itself, I still have to translate the meaning of what they're actually really trying to get across. And so translation itself is still a major problem in society, where people have mistranslated things coming from ancient times, and they've repackaged them to seem to be much more than what they really are, when in reality they have a practical meaning and application to them, but it doesn't actually diminish any of the value which is being spewed forth or transmitted. But a lot of people, they love the mystical side of things and the magical side of things, and misunderstood science is merely magic. It's kind of like people go to see a magician. Why is it that people go to see a magician? Because they want to be tricked. They want there to be magic. And so they don't look for the trick, but they're looking for the magic. And in a lot of ways today, people actually do that. They're looking for the trick because they want there to be magic. But, just because that's how it is doesn't make it any less magical. The miracle of life itself is just that. It's magical. So, you really don't have to add any more things to it for it to be magical. You just have to realize that it is already magical. Just because it's become normal to you doesn't make it any less magical. In the sense of your mind, because people are always seeking growth, they want there to be more, and they want there to be advancement and progression. And so in a lot of ways, it's your seeking for advancement and progression that actually leads you away from the true nature of what is actually being told. And so you fall into a pitfall of something which actually really isn't true, but it's merely your human nature which wants it to be true, because you're searching for something more. There has to be more. It's like all the people that believe in extraterrestrials or aliens from outside of our solar system. In a lot of ways, I think, and before I begin the discussion on this, I'm not necessarily saying that aliens and extraterrestrials don't exist, because, if you apply statistics and probabilities and the immensity of the universe, then it's pretty much statistically probable if we're here, then people outside of our solar system are there. However, overcoming the laws of physics to adequately, get ourselves from one point in the universe to another actually diminishes the probability itself that there are peoples with the ability and capability to reach our planetary system. Anyways, I think in a lot of ways, all of these ET enthusiasts, really, it's like people going to see a magician. They want there to be the trick. Well, people want there to be ETs because it, in a sense, gives them the availability and the option to escape what they think to be a cage, which is the planet. And if there's a society outside of our own planetary body and solar system which is advanced enough for interstellar travel and intergalactic communications and travel between planetary bodies, then just think about the advancements that this society must have in regards to the sciences of biology, health, education, sociology, and everything far and in between. So, in a way, these ET enthusiasts are a lot more similar to religious worshiping class sects than they might actually identify themselves being a part of. Because these ETs are in a way their saviors. They're going to save them from the problems of humanity and of civilization on planet Earth. And in a lot of ways, people just need to realize that, hey, that the social constructs of the planet itself are due to humanity, and that we have the power to actually alter humanity's destiny if we merely take the time and come up with a plan and find a way to motivate everybody towards one goal. Then you can, in a sense, accomplish all those things you want to achieve. But human nature drives us for and towards wanting things right now. So oh man, it would be so dramatic if ET was to descend from the sky and bring with them knowledge of the universe, which would directly influence my life in a major way and cause this whole paradigm shift of society. And with this paradigm shift, everything's going to change. The whole world as we know it's going to be different. The social hierarchy and constructs of society and the socio-demographics of the world are going to be changed in an immense and direct fashion as soon as we contact ET. And in a lot of ways, I think that all these people that are ET enthusiasts, and they show, ancient record of mankind coming in contact with aliens, it's misconstrued evidence, because what's actually going on is aliens really do exist. But just like what I was talking about earlier, that even within a population, you have to translate language. Through time, you have to translate language more effective than even within a certain population. Alien merely means unfamiliar and unknown. So literally back in ancient times, if a civilization was to come across the oceans through a boat to a certain continent, then the indigenous peoples of that continent would in fact interpret these people as being aliens. See, it's a lot more esoterical and mystical, but much more practical in reality and in the true sense of history. But that doesn't mean it's any less magical, because the ability for mankind to do that in the first place is still magical in my mind. But people still don't like to take it for what it's actually worth, and they want to add more to it, So this whole evidence is being misconstrued, where these people, aliens, did come to their societies and civilizations, but they were foreigners from another land, still here, like in our planetary body, which in fact is still defined as an alien unit. And so, you get all these crazy depictions and mythologies which arise. The visitors came, and yeah, they were aliens. But it's being misconstrued to sell something because it adds a sense of mysticism to it. And people are attracted to mysticism, so, but they don't want to see the trick. They don't want to see the string up the sleeve, so to speak. But there it is, there's the string. So something else that's kind of interesting though is that there is quite a bit of evidence that societies in the past did actually interact with each other. But however, the history books which we learn from today are really in direct contradiction to the fact that advanced civilizations and societies in the past may actually have communicated abroad with other societies of their times. And I think in a lot of ways it has to do with people love their sense of identity. And as soon as you start coming in and saying, hey, guess what? There were other people here first, this whole sense of progress, which you have actually identified yourself with, is actually not necessarily true. People have a really hard time at looking at life in a much more multi-linear fashion rather than one line itself. They like to see one line of progress. Kind of when we grew up, it's like there was this one line that came and it interacted over here and caused all of this. But the fact of the matter is it's like a bunch of different bubbles that are interacting with other bubbles, and they're all coming in contact with each other, and some are growing and some are popping and going away, and some are becoming a part of other bubbles and growing with each other. And history itself is more like that rather than all this like linear sense of the timeline. The timeline itself really isn't just one line. It's like this multi-linear thing. So anyways, back to what I was getting towards is that in a lot of the history books which we grow up learning from is this very linear oriented fashion of history. And maybe they do that because as you're learning and growing up, a lot of these concepts are in a lot of ways maybe too complex for your mind at that time to comprehend. And so they present it in a much more linear fashion than this multi-linear reality where, hey, guess what? There were civilizations before our civilization, and they were fairly advanced in their own right because, they believed in certain things, and these beliefs affected their behaviors, which affected the way they viewed the world, which affected their society. And we try to look back and say, all right, well, how do we get here today? It's a lot more complex than just one people coming across, an ocean and settling the land, where in fact there were already people here anyways, and other places as well. But the evidence is there that a lot of these societies were in fact communicating and traveling abroad, and society has been fairly advanced for as long as recorded history has been recorded. And I think that it's a lot less really, if you start researching into this stuff, all of a sudden people like bring up a conspiracy and everything like that. In my own opinion, I think it's a lot less conspiracy than it actually really is. I just think that people really don't care. And And that to me is a bigger problem than conspiracy. It's like, wow, these people really don't care to actually figure out true history. And they would rather just live their, commodity and consumer-based lives and fulfilling their immediate pleasures rather than fulfilling moments of knowledge and actualities. And that to me is a much bigger problem than, people merely saying, it's a conspiracy, and whatnot. And I think that people really need to look into it a little more and say, hey, yeah, maybe we are advancing in a little bit of the wrong direction, and maybe people were advanced, just as advanced, or maybe even more so than we are today in certain regards and aspects of life. And all those things need to be taken into consideration. There's a lot of evidence, but it's not necessarily mainstream, that shows that people of different cultures in ancient times were communicating with each other abroad, across broad oceans and things to that extent. In a lot of ways it has to do with architecture. And people say, well, how come isn't there more evidence? Why isn't there more physical evidence? Well, the actual reality is I looked up this study just the other day on how many people actually travel outside of the US themselves. So I myself have been born in the United States, and I wanted to figure out, okay, so today we live in a society where it is widely accepted, across the population, that everybody is knowledgeable that you can go to these other areas of the world, and people exist there, and we have the ability to use utilizing spacecraft. See what I did there? I used the word which to describe airplane makes it no less true, but adds a lot of esoteric meaning to it. So anyways, we use spacecraft to go to these other places, and it's not really refuted that we can do so. But do you want to know what percentage of the population actually does so? It's like less than 1%. Less than 1% of the United States actually ever travels outside of the United States to another country. So how much gene flow between the populations and continents is there actually today? And how many artifacts get, tossed around, and ideas and physical objects for archaeologists in the future to look back on today's society and say, hey, these were people communicating with each other across broad regions of land. And in actuality, there wouldn't really be that much evidence. If a catastrophe was to occur, or to something to that extent, then, the whole networking system would be down and a lot of that stuff would be lost. And so the only things that would really survive an extended period of time would be physical objects. But the fact of the matter is that still less than 1% of the population actually travels abroad anyways. So how many of those objects are prevalent in today's society anyways? It's pretty much nil. And how many of those objects within this 1% of households which house these objects are going to survive a catastrophe and survive the extended amount of time before they're rediscovered in the future? Pretty much nil as well. So it's really not that hard to conceive conceptually about why there really isn't that much evidence. But when the evidence does show, for example, mummies having tobacco when tobacco was only native and known to be a produced crop of the Americas, then it goes to show, okay, these ancient pharaohs were in fact communicating with peoples within America. However, it was, if it's less than 1% in our population today, who's to say that it wasn't, 0.01% back in ancient times? Only direct lineage of royalty ever got the chance to travel abroad because they're utilizing navigational systems across oceans, allowing them to do so, which takes quite a bit of time and effort in itself. And so really only the upper echelon get to do so. So you're not really going to see much evidence, but there is evidence actually out there. very slight amounts of genetic evidence, but there is still slight amounts of genetic evidence, and very slight amounts of physical objects, but there is still evidence of physical objects. The most prominent amount of evidence is in architecture, and you can see today that ideas themselves are passed across borders fairly readily. And one of the most passed around ideas is the architectural styles of a culture, which is in direct communication with other cultures. You can see the architecture be passed through borders and across lands. And we see that connection between architecture. So there is definite evidence behind it, but the will and desire of the people to investigate this evidence further isn't there. And so, people accept this very skewed portion of what they deem to be history, but they're afraid to explore it because they don't want to destroy their identity. Because as soon as you offer a different explanation to an event that they've identified with their entire life, then it pretty much destroys their reality. And, their ego, and causes this whole sense of, well, if this isn't true, then this isn't true, then this isn't true. And it's like, what is true? And so it's kind of a scary thing for a lot of people, actually, because this whole layer of knowledge that they've built their life upon collapses in on itself. And they find themselves standing there asking themselves, well, then who am I? And so progress towards that has to be taken in a much more kind of step-by-step manner, and before it's accepted, to be general knowledge within a society. And kind of getting back to the fact that, maybe these peoples in ancient times were a little more connected with things than we are today in a lot of ways. And I look at religious practices and religious ceremonies, and the more complicated the ritual that people perform, the more it actually affects their behavior and their psychology. So, people that grow up in a certain belief system actually are really directly affected by this belief system. And the more complex the rituals that they perform and are a part of is in direct relation to their behaviors and their personal psychology. And, by affecting somebody's psychology, you directly affect their beliefs, which directly affects their actions, which directly affects the environment. And, eventually, through that whole bubble reaction I was talking about earlier, comes to directly affect me as an individual living at the same time as them. And the effect of people through time itself is something kind of interesting to dive into. How is it that somebody who was millennia ago, how is it they can actually affect my experience today? Again, a lot of people look at things as so linear, rather than being this extension of bubbles that are constantly expanding, popping and contracting, and becoming one with another bubble and whatever. And so each little step that I take through my waking life, and each action that I take a part of, is in essence creating this ripple effect from the now into the future. By participating in things right now, I'm having a direct effect on what's going to be. And how significant this effect actually is in direct relation to how significant of an impact I wish to make. You know, how big of a footstep am I really going to leave? Am I really going to influence that much? Not only right now, but in future generations to come. And so, you know, things from the past have a lot of sway on the present, and things in the now have a lot of sway in the future, but they're still conditioned upon what has already been. So it's a very complex thing to really contemplate, but if you kind of sit down and think about it, you can figure it out. It's like a nuclear bomb going off has significant impact on the entire world, you know, both through the planet itself and up into the atmosphere. And in a lot of ways, your words and your actions can cause paradigm shifts, which, you know, cause new ways of thinking, and in a way it can be just as explosive as a nuclear blast. You know, erasing what once was and replacing it with now what is, so to speak. And man, this road that I'm on right now is nice. It's nice to be away from all the automobiles. I'm on some dirt road right now, and it's pretty nice. But I'm gonna come back into busy road here in just a second. This has been a nice walk. If any of you are listening to this, if anyone else is listening to this, you know, I would actually recommend this. This has been a fairly good exercise for me. You know, start yourself up a YouTube channel or whatever, and take your phone out, and what do you really want to say to the world? What do you want your footprint to be, and how do you really think things are? What do you think really is going on? And what's your opinion on certain matters, and where do you want things to go, and how would you change things right now that are? And really allow yourself to communicate these messages. You don't really need like a psychologist or somebody to do that, but you just need to put yourself in an environment which allows you to do that in a way which is deemed as, you know, socially acceptable. It's kind of weird, right, to think about it that way, because if I was walking down the street just talking about all this stuff with no cell phone here, recording my messages with the hopes to upload it into some data network where other people could listen to it, then I would be viewed as a crazy person. It wouldn't be socially acceptable. But it's still weird, the fact that I'm doing this, and then it makes it more socially acceptable, because it's like, oh, he has a purpose behind it. He's recording it, he's gonna upload it and share it, which will allow other people to listen to it. And so it makes it and deems it as socially acceptable. And that's the next thing I feel like I want to talk about is how psychology really does affect your biochemistry. One of the most interesting classes I ever took was a class called health psychology, and it was in the relationship between what we perceive mentally and our internal movements or our internal reactions. So let me give you an example. Let's say that I go to the store or I'm reading, this is one of my favorites. Let's say I'm reading a popular science magazine, which I do actually enjoy reading popular science magazines. In the back of these magazines, there's always like these advertisements for pheromones, and like, you know, you buy this pheromone if they have ones for men and ones for women. You buy the male pheromone and it increases your sex life, it increases your attraction for women to be attracted to you as a man. And you know, these are pheromones that are not necessarily able to be picked up by your nasal cavity and smelled, but subconsciously the opposite sex picks up these pheromones and is able to, you know, pick up on the fact that you're sexually active and that you are a sexually and physically fit person, which is something that they want to, you know, propagate for future generations, because that's what life's all about, is you know, the propagation of something which the organism itself seems to be as fit. So they pick up on these pheromones and they say, this is a fit individual that me as a biological thing wants to propagate for future generations, because I'm so concerned with fitness and the evolution of my species. So anyways, that has a lot to do with what I was talking about earlier, how that's not necessarily so much the case anymore, because we have the ability to change our environment, which kind of diminishes, you know, the fact that I need to mate with this other individual because they're so fit given this condition and the environment we find ourselves in. But anyways, so what happens is, let's say you buy this pheromone from Popular Science magazine. Now, how is it that you think that this could actually be giving you results without the pheromone actually having a biochemical response between your body and another opposite sex? Well, the fact of the matter is you invest in the product, and as soon as you've made an investment in the product, then you are directly connected to the results, because you want there to be results. You want to show results, and so you're biased from the beginning because you are wanting to prove this product to be true. And who wouldn't? Because obviously, by investing in the product, you are you know, telling yourself, whether it's subconsciously or consciously, that you are in fact looking for somebody of the opposite sex to have a relationship with. So you make the investment in the product. Now, as soon as you invest in the product, I'm willing to bet that this product isn't the only thing that's going to, you know, become a part of your daily routine. As soon as you make a monetary investment in something, it's much more likely to influence your behavior, even if that which you invest in doesn't directly have any scientific credence or a significant amount of evidence to back up its claims. What I mean by that is, so you invest in this product, and as soon as you start using it on a daily basis, you're probably going to be participating in other activities which are going to increase your sexual affluence from the perspectives of somebody who's the opposite sex. You know, you're going to be maybe grooming yourself more, and you're going to be maybe, you know, going out more, because you're going to test it out, and you're going to say to yourself, oh, hey, what's up, Brady? Good. Just documenting my life. Beard's looking good. Hey, how's your milking goats?
Alright.
Yeah? What got you into that? What? What got you into that whole thing?
Your mom?
Really?
Yeah.
It sounded like you're trying to make a joke or something. Your mom?
No, she, cause your mom wanted to have someone help her with that one she bought.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't given very much milk, and so she went and got this other one.
Yeah.
And then dropped it off.
For sure.
Yeah. But it's actually been good. The kids like it.
Yeah? You have them go out there and milk?
Huh?
You have them go out there and milk?
I have to go,
Do you wake them up, what, at 4 in the morning or what?
I get up about 5:30.
Really?
5:30.
For sure. All right, Mr. Duck Dynasty in the flesh.
Hey, good to see you.
Yeah, for sure.
Sunglasses.
Hey, thanks. You too, man. Have a good day, Brady.
You too.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, you know, as soon as you invest in this product, you then groom yourself more. You then go and you have yourself in an area and location and events where you're much more likely to come in contact with somebody of the opposite sex, which is going to give you results because, you know, before you weren't doing these things, but now you've invested in this product and you're doing them, and then you attribute the results to this product. Now here's the really interesting thing. What if, in fact, this product, oh man, this is one of those moments where it's like my mind can conceive of the idea like internally and subconsciously, but I'm having a really difficult time at actually explaining what is conceived within the depths of my mind. It's like I know exactly how it would work, but the fact of the matter is that I can't necessarily communicate it. And I'm going to allow this to take me on some other parallel here, or tangent within the conversation, because I just realized that I won't be able to explain it without looking like an idiot. So this is something that's always been really interesting to me. Internally and chemically and biologically, your body understands the most difficult courses or facets of knowledge that life itself can offer you to study and pass in terms of like an examination or a test within a class. But isn't it kind of odd that, you know, I can say organic chemistry is the most difficult class which somebody can participate in. You know, to be able to consciously bring forth this knowledge, which internally you already know every aspect of, and subconsciously you are participating in this knowledge on a day-to-day basis. It's like subconsciously and internally, my body is the most proficient master of organic chemistry that there ever was, because it actually, you know, performs in the manner of chemical reactions in both part of physical chemistry and organic chemistry and other facets of chemistry. My body itself, you know, reacts in a manner in which it understands these facets of knowledge, but it's not necessarily like I can consciously bring forth that knowledge and go and pass any test or exam that ever was. You know, that's kind of like, that's really odd, isn't it? It's like your body understands physics because in a sense, you have to utilize the knowledge and components of physics internally, you know, from your molecular to your physiological makeup. But that doesn't mean you can go and eloquently, you know, describe every equation that ever was within physics and pass any physics test that there ever will be. Isn't that kind of odd that it's like internally you know all this stuff, but it's like you can't express it vocally or verbally or consciously? If that's not odd to you, it's odd to me at least. It's kind of like being in the universe and being a part of it, but at the same time, you aren't necessarily aware of everything that's going on. And maybe that's like just an initial condition for life to have a sense of life, where it's like, of course you can't necessarily be in tune with everything, because if you're in tune with everything, then what are you? You're in a sense nothing, because, you know, you're this unconscious thing, which is the ever-flowing energies that is the universe itself. So of course you can't necessarily be in touch and in tune with all that is, because once you are in a sense not yourself anymore, and you're everything, which is nothing. So maybe that's like some neurological like blockage that's set in place due to evolutionary manners, where it's like have any of you ever heard of like the blood-brain barrier, where your brain doesn't allow certain things within your blood system to enter within your mind? It's like a safety mechanism. What if like the ability for you to not connect with everything was in fact a safety mechanism set up to give you a sense of life? Because if in a sense you were connected with all those things, it's no different really than being dead. You know, because maybe that's kind of what happens when you die anyways, is you become connected with all that is. You pretty much become a part of anything or everything anyways when you kind of pass on. So maybe it's a safety mechanism set up through evolutionary mechanisms which actually blocks you from doing so on purpose, due to the fact that if you could do so, you could no longer identify as something which was having a sense of life and consciousness itself. So anyways, I finally arrived at my destination. That was a nice walk and really allowed me to communicate just a lot of different topics. And if anybody was able to listen through all this, I commend you and would advocate you to possibly do the same. Well, anyways, have a great day.